and I'll be talking this afternoon, introducing our recently published environmental sustainability strategy and what that means and how that sets a direction for national highways and our supply chain. So I'll hand over to the other speakers to introduce themselves.
Yeah. Hi, I'm James Geraghty. I'm a sustainability manager with Kier Transportation. So my remit is to help develop strategy and action plans around sustainability and support our contracts and projects on all elements of sustainability. And with me today is Rebecca.
Hi, yep. So my name is Rebecca Cottington. I work with James for Kier Transportation. I'm the Senior Environmental Manager in the maintenance side of the business, which means I support the ongoing national highways contracts as well as our local authority contracts. Thanks, Mike.
Great, thanks. I'll just load up my presentation and then we'll get underway. Hopefully that's showing. Is that
Yeah, I can see that.
James?
Yeah,
you can see that, yes? Sorry, was that a yes? The presentation's loaded.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thanks. Sorry. Okay, right. So introducing National Highways Environmental Sustainability Strategy. Well, first of all, a little bit about National Highways, which I'm sure those on the call are familiar with, but I think it's to just re-emphasize the point that we have a national strategic network that has a presence across the country as a whole, and with our estate, there's a huge number of assets ranging from bridges and structures, signs, street lights, sensors, electronic messages, to a soft estate of around 30,000 hectares, as well as 1,000 drainage ponds, etc., across 4,500 miles of road network, or in total 10,000 miles of carriageways if you add them all onto one another. And so nationally, that is quite a footprint within the environment, and not without its impact upon the environment through the historic development of the road network. But it also presents significant opportunity, and that's what our new environmental strategy is about: changing the focus away from mitigating the impacts of our networks to realizing the huge opportunity that our network has across the country to connect and join up and reconnect landscapes and habitats, and to recognize that the environmental performance of our business and our network is of importance to the country. And so our new strategy aims to set out sort of our ambitious but credible plans to how we can achieve net zero carbon, be positive for nature, and reduce the environmental impacts of our communities. We want our roads to be a force for good in the environment. So at the heart of our new environmental sustainability strategy, which we published in May, is a new ambitious vision that we feel reflects well where we want to take the business in the longer term. A connected country, a thriving environment, and behind this new vision is recognition that the core purpose of national highways will continue to remain important into the future. Our business of connecting people, places, communities, and the importance of roads will continue into the future. It's the backbone of the economy and of national significance. But we also recognize that our health, well-being, and future prosperity is dependent upon a thriving natural environment. And so it's essential that we manage, maintain, and improve the strategic road network in an environmentally sustainable way, and without mortgaging the future for today's needs, and ensuring that there's a positive legacy for future generations to come. So behind our long-term vision, we've identified 3 strategic outcome areas where we consider that if we focus our efforts towards delivering tangible interventions in these areas, we can achieve our long-term vision. And I'll go on to talk a little bit more about the ambition behind these 3 strategic outcomes of nature, carbon, and communities later on in the presentation. But in achieving the ambitions for nature, carbon, and communities, we feel we can achieve that long-term vision. But building upon that, we've identified 9 priority areas that, if we target our activities, will support delivery in those 3 strategic outcome areas. And we've identified these 9 areas to maximize the benefits across those 3 strategic outcome areas. And we've moved away from a traditional approach to looking at just in silos the conventional environmental aspects we may have looked at, such as looking at noise or air or water in isolation, because we recognize the complexity of the environment and the need to manage it in a more holistic way, thereby taking an intervention in any one of these 9 priority areas could support delivery of the ambition in more than one of the strategic outcome areas. So if I just run quickly round the outer wheel, as I say, each of these 9 priority areas, any identified actions that we prioritize within these priority areas will contribute to any one of the strategic outcome areas. So mitigating pollution, things such as air quality, water, noise, for example, integrating our network into the wider landscape around reconnecting and restoring and ensuring the network sits comfortably within the wider landscape, prioritizing the use of nature-based solutions, not just to enhance biodiversity and create better sense of place for communities, but to also provide climate resilience, good road and environmental design to support better towns and communities, better alignment and setting with nature, and of course reduce carbon footprint. Greater priority to conserving and enhancing historic and cultural value, both within our ownership and in close proximity to the estate. Activities that produce cleaner, quieter journeys and therefore less pollution, less carbon, and quieter, more tranquil environments. Leaner construction and more circular, greater emphasis on the circular economy and waste minimization, and optimizing resource and energy use across the network. So these are the 9 priority areas we are focusing our efforts on now to develop detailed implementation plans and activities to support delivery of our towards our 3 strategic outcomes and our long-term vision. So where are we now in that journey? Well, this is an illustration of what a part of the network could currently look like. And if we recognize that when the network as it's been developed over 60 years to differing design standards and the like, we have a 4,500 mile network, but in places we recognize that the construction of the network has caused severance, fragmented habitats, altered natural catchments, and impacted upon the natural environments and communities where we've done so in parts across the network. Over 4 million people use the network today, which generates road user carbon emissions as well as noise, air and water pollution. And we've been working for many years now to address and mitigate some of these impacts, and more so since 2015, in partnership with stakeholders, in a way that supports delivery of environmental benefits beyond the network. So this is an illustration of how the network could look in parts, across the country now, and where we want to get to. It is it is a more enhanced and integrated network with the natural environment, and we want to see a greater distribution of these sorts of interventions across the network by 2050. And we've got examples here, and they're set out in our published strategy, which you can find on the website. Interventions that improve the health and well-being of local communities, either through reduction in air quality and noise, but water quality improvements, to promoting active travel in and around the network, facilitating active travel networks that provide alternative modes of getting around the place, using natural flood management to create resilience in the natural catchment to protect both the strategic road network, but also the effects of the road network within that catchment and to local communities. Delivering better road design. In this picture here, we've got an example of a green bridge reconnecting the severed landscape from the previous picture. Increased connectivity through planting and management of our soft estate and integrating it with the wider landscape, and taking opportunities where the setting of heritage features in close proximity to the network has been affected by the road network and restored for the enjoyment of those local communities more widely. So some examples of the kind of interventions we're looking to pursue to sort of help realise our ambitions and longer term vision. Now, you wouldn't see these necessarily all in one place on the network. They've been brought together in this picture to show the range of sort of things, but to illustrate the point. But we would want to be seeing many more of these types of sort of positive environmental interventions sort of distributed across the network going forward. So if I talk a little bit about what this means for nature, our ambition for the strategic outcome of nature is to protect, restore, and enhance a richer, resilient, and more biodiverse environment. And that can mean a range of things. We unpack that a little. It means understanding the environmental value of our land and prioritizing habitats across it. It's about managing our estate as an environmental asset, just like we would structures, pavements, or drainage, putting it on an equal footing and securing future funding and management practices. It's about better integrating our network into the wider natural and historic landscape through targeted interventions, managing trees and vegetation in a way to support climate resilient landscapes and vibrant species rich habitats to give that diversity, and promoting a clean, healthy and tranquil natural environment by reducing pollution across our state where we can, and employing and prioritizing nature-based solutions where we can to enhance the habitats and wildlife of our land as part of wider ecosystems. What it means for carbon, and what I didn't say at the top of the meeting, is that we have a published net zero plan. The environmental sustainability strategy doesn't introduce any new commitments beyond our published net zero plan, but what we have done is brought the net zero plan within the wider environmental sustainability strategy. And so, if you like, it's a bit of a lift and shift of the net zero plan into this wider environmental sustainability strategy, as we feel that is a clearer way to present our messaging within the business. And so the ambition is, as presented in the net zero plan, about delivering net zero corporate emissions by 2030, maintenance and construction emissions by 2040, and road user emissions by 2050, and the identified objectives here reflect what is set out and been out in the public domain for a little while on our net zero plan. So I won't dwell too much on this one, as it's nature and communities which are primarily the new features of the environmental sustainability strategy plus the net zero plan. So for communities, our ambition is to support community well-being by tackling local environmental impacts and increasing climate resilience. And that's about minimizing as much as we possibly can the air pollution, water and noise pollution across our network, and specifically within communities adjacent to our network. It's about employing nature-based solutions to improve climate resilience and protect the quality of life and well-being, and recognizing that where we can deploy nature-based solutions, that gives not just a better natural environment, but also a greater sense of place for communities where we can do that. It's about applying good road and environmental design and consulting effectively with communities around what it is that they want, and ensuring that we deliver what they want rather than what we think they want. And it's about being a responsible custodian of heritage features within our ownership on our estate, but also looking to achieve enhancements or improvements to those that are in proximity to our network and affected by our network. So the strategy is ambitious, and the detail of it is currently being mapped out through internal workshops to develop detailed implementation plans for each of the strategic outcome areas, and those 9 priority areas and the commitments identified within the strategy. So how does this work with our supply chain? Well, we need our supply chain support to deliver the ambitions within this strategy. So we want to see our supply chain sort of align their ambitions with ours, and to reflect and support delivery of to understand and support delivery of these desired outcomes. We think it will require a change in the way we work, both through the partnerships we have with the supply chain, but with how we work collaboratively with our stakeholders. We know that we can deliver a lot more than the sum of all of the parts when we do so in partnership with our stakeholders, and we can deliver many more environmental enhancements beyond our network that we wouldn't be able to do through just addressing issues on our network. And it's that alignment with stakeholders' needs, objectives, ambitions, and ensuring that we deliver our road policy objectives and improve our own environmental performance is the trick here, and understanding how we can do so effectively together and with our stakeholders. And there is a need to sort of ensure that we grow our environmental capabilities and the relevant skills, not just technical in terms of environmental technical skills, but partnering skills to support delivery of this strategy. So just a few more minutes. I want to give a quick example of the sort of initiative we've delivered on the A30 Chiverton to Carlin Cross scheme in the southwest, where working in partnership with a number of stakeholders on this scheme, that the project team have been able to deliver a vast array of environmental benefits beyond just the footprint of the scheme itself. And this was through this partnership working, these opportunities were able to be identified, and through a stewardship scheme working with landowners in the area, we're able to fund landscape interventions, a range of interventions from a defined palette of interventions that would restore and reconnect and enhance the natural environment on a landscape scale around the whole scheme, as well as delivering significant amount of cycle network as well. And I think the points here about this example is that they've been able to deliver holistically across, at least we think, sort of 5 of the 9 priority areas of the strategy, and against each of the strategic outcomes. So really good holistic sort of approach to delivering environmental improvements that have created 32 habitat areas that have been reconnected, 13,000 trees planted, and 4 ponds and habitats created, and a number of orchards. The green ribs, which are these reconnected landscape corridors around the scheme, have delivered a 97% biodiversity net gain, as well as the CO2 being absorbed by the tree planting across the scheme and the natural flood management. So really good example of how holistically the environmental enhancements can be delivered that really align and demonstrate what we're trying to achieve through the strategy. And my final slide here is our roadmap to delivering at least the early opportunities and enabling activities out to 2030 to support the longer term delivery of our long-term vision by 2050. These are the commitments and the years in which we aim to commit to deliver them within the business. They're set out in the strategy. I won't go through them here, but you have the slide deck. But what I would say is we're working actively within the business, across the business, to build out implementation plans and defined milestones and resourcing requirements to support delivery of these objectives, which will in time require sort of the support of our supply chain, as well as working with stakeholders to deliver. So I hope of our National Highways environmental sustainability strategy. Please put any questions you have in the Q&A session, and I'll hand over to James and Rebecca now to give their presentation. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that, Mike. Hi everyone. So just while Rebecca's loading our slides, we're going to do a bit of a joint thing from Keir's point of view. I'm going to do a few slides around how our Keir sustainability strategy sort of fits within the wider landscape, and then Rebecca's going to go into a bit more detail about some of the individual elements that we're working on.
Is that showing the slideshow now, James?
Yeah, that's all
great.
Good, brilliant, thank you. So I guess the first aside is that many of you may be aware of us as Keir Highways, which we were until the end of June, and then following a bit of a rejig in the wider Keir business, we're now known as Keir Transportation, which means we've inherited a few other transport-related elements. So we'll also be broadening our scope to include rail and seaports and aviation and stuff. So that's a bit of a new, wider remit for us, but with the same one planet approach to sustainability. That's ensuring that all those 3 pillars of sustainability, the economic, the natural, and the social, are all in balance as we address the issues around sustainability. So we have a sustainability strategy within Keir Transportation and a one-planet action plan, and that sits at the heart of everything. And we make sure constantly that we're aligning that strategy from the top to the bottom. So at the top you have government and the wider Keir group needs. We have the needs of our clients like National Highways. We have our own corporate mission, and then at the sort of bottom end we have our contracts and our projects, who are actually the ones doing the day-to-day work. And what we want to see is that that strategy is aligned all the way from top to bottom, with lines of influencing traveling both ways. So at the top, like I say, you have things like government legislation and policy. So in recent years, we've seen a lot of activity around public procurement notes, the PPNs, which we need to comply with when we're bidding for large-scale public work. So in particular, we're talking about 0620, which is a social impact one, which includes the need to focus on climate change resilience, inequality, and the promotion of well-being. And then there's 0621, which is all around embedding sort of carbon reduction plans and embedding the management of carbon and those carbon reductions into our sort of business as usual. And that helps us meet the government's legal net zero by 2050 target. We then, like I said, we're aligning with the wider Kier group to make sure that all parts of Kier are all traveling in the same direction in terms of sustainability, and we're aligning with our clients' ambition. So everything that Mike's talked about in his slides around the needs of the environmental sustainability, those three areas, and all the sort of metrics and KPIs that sit underneath that, our strategy will be aligned with that. And then at the bottom, like I said, we have our contracts and our projects who have working groups for sustainability, and they're the ones that drive the ideas, and the actions then feed back up to try and meet those ambitions and targets. We're having a bit of a revamp coming up. So Kier Group are overhauling their sustainability framework as we speak. So in the autumn, the transportation sustainability strategy is also going to be overhauled, like I said, so that we can ensure that it maintains that alignment across the board. But the focus will remain, and Mike sort of alluded to it in his presentation, that we maintain that holistic view of sustainability. So we take this one planet approach, we split it down into 10 individual principles that cover the economic, the natural, and the environment, and the social elements. But we recognize that they're all interlinked and they need to be addressed in a harmonious way. So rather than addressing them in isolation. Having said that, each of those principles has its own key target and its own set of actions, but there's always a clear interlinking with the other principles around them. So for example, if you take a very basic example, if you find ways to eliminate or reduce waste from something that you're working on, whether that be through design or through operational changes, you're also probably going to reduce the number of vehicle movements that are going to and from site, which in turn then reduces the amount of fuel that you're using in those vehicles, and these will have a carbon benefit. And it's also likely, if you're reducing vehicle movements and emissions, you're also improving the local air quality, you're reducing congestion, and so you're also providing a benefit to the local community. So by thinking of schemes and projects in that sort of holistic way, you can actually address multiple elements of that sustainability framework in one go. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So just a little bit more on those sort of three key elements. So with in terms of carbon, there's a lot of stuff at the moment around various accreditations. So we recently had our science-based targets verified, which shows our ambition to drive down carbon emissions within our direct business, so scope 1 and 2 by 2030. And we have also some very ambitious targets around scope 3, which is the stuff that we do across the value chain, so the emissions of the schemes that we're working on for our various clients. So it's all the materials, the waste, and all that kind of stuff. We're also engaged in PAS 2080, and what accreditation to things like science-based targets and PAS 2080 show is that we're taking the whole issue around carbon reduction seriously, and that we're starting to embed it into our business as usual. So what we're trying to get to a point to, whereas it's not just about environmental and sustainable professionals like myself or Rebecca talking about it, it's where it's embedded and ingrained in every aspect of the business. So from it's being understood and action from our senior leaders all the way down to our design teams and our operational managers and our operational staff, so that everybody is driving in the same direction. On the social side of things, Kier Highways was the first in the sector to achieve the social value quality mark level 2, which was last year, which is an independent accreditation, which again demonstrates that we understand the importance of the community and the social value impacts on those communities where we live and work. And as the award said when we got it, is that it shows that we're delivering authentic social value, measuring and embedding social impact across our supply chain and our local community partners. So again, like we've said all the way through, it's understanding the relationship between the work that we do and the community that we're working within. And then we have nature. So nature is becoming an everyday part of the work we do. So you hear the talk about biodiversity, habitat loss, biodiversity net gain, all those sort of phrases are being thrown around a lot at the moment. And in essence, what it means is we can't just do token sort of bits of replanting on schemes anymore, or even sort of like for like match the vegetation that was taken out on a scheme. We need to start showing how we're actually going to positively improve the existing landscape. And that's because the roadside networks that we help manage are vital areas of natural habitat. And if we manage them effectively and well, we can preserve and even boost that biodiversity. It helps with climate change mitigation impacts, things like eroding slopes or alleviating stormwater runoff. And of course, if you do it right, you also get that aesthetic and well-being value from a well-managed roadside verge. Anyway, Rebecca, if you want to go on to yours.
That's great. Thanks. I'm going to leave my camera off because my sound has been patchy and I got thrown out of the session this morning. So hopefully if I leave the camera off, it will leave me in. So we just wanted to give you 2 or 3 examples really of where the work we're doing on the ground as Kier Transportation is feeding into and supporting those 3 kind of pillars of National Highways strategy. So the carbon, the nature and the community. So the first one I've kind of picked to highlight is the work that we're doing around biochar. And this is something we're self-funding at the moment to look at the feasibility of using this product in what we do. It's essentially, if you're not familiar with the term biochar, essentially it is a charcoal-like product. It's produced by combusting plant matter, so biomass at very high temperatures, but crucially in the absence of oxygen. So you might have heard the term pyrolysis, and that's what we're talking about here. This essentially locks in the carbon that otherwise would have been released to the atmosphere. So if the material had naturally rotted down, or indeed it was burnt in oxygen, it would have released that carbon as carbon dioxide and then water as well. The benefit of the pyrolysis is it's locking this in. So the fact, effectively, the material you get out is actually carbon sink. So we're working with a company called Terrafix. They're part of RSK and Swansea University to study how biochar then interacts with things like heavy metals and hydrocarbons. There's already been some work done previously that shows that biochar can effectively attract these sort of pollutants and take them out, as it were, of the water environment. We're also looking to build on that work and look at microplastics, because you may be aware that a lot of the microplastics, quite a high percentage that gets into our waterways and then ultimately the ocean and marine environment, which we all know is problematic from what we've seen on the news, can that also be attracted by the biochar? So that's a really interesting bit of work that we're involved in. And ultimately, perhaps this material could be used as a filter drain or that sort of thing. It's also suitable for being used in construction itself. And we're doing a bit of work as well with Aston University and our local highways contracts, because biochar also has properties by which it can enhance growth in vegetation. So there's loads going on in this area, and it's got a lot of potential. So what we're looking to do following this feasibility study is to look at a site trial, but it's really important that we find a trial on a site where vegetation needs to be removed anyway. So what we don't want to do is encourage people to start cutting down trees willy-nilly to create carbon sinks if it's not needed, because obviously that's kind of counterproductive to the bigger picture. But there is lots of ash dieback on our network, and there are schemes that are coming up that unfortunately have inevitable removal of vegetation, and that's what we're looking to target. So this little picture at the bottom basically shows you how the process would work. So the vegetation that's got to come out would be the input. It would be dried and then chipped. It's then fed into a pyrolysis plant where it's cooked at very high temperature, and then this produces the biochar. And this can come out, it can be a sort of dust, it can be a pellet, it can be a bigger sort of lump of charcoal, as it were. So some really interesting work going on there that we can obviously feed into what the client is doing. Keeping in the carbon side of things, I've put a couple of facts at the top of the slide, but I'm not going to go into the fleet side of things, but because I think we're all looking to move in the same direction, essentially cars and small vehicles going to electric, and probably looking at hydrogen or other alternative fuels for the larger vehicles. What I did want to touch on was the handheld plant. So about 18 months ago, we decided in Kia Highways, as we were at the time, that we were going to bite the bullet and switch all the sort of fit for purpose small handheld plant over to electric. The reason for doing that was across the whole of the business, there was around 373 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions that we could save each year compared to fossil fuel equivalent. And from a cost perspective, it also added up. So across the whole of the highways business, there was only a £14,000 additional cost when we factored in the hire and all the fuel savings and that sort of thing. So in terms of the return on investment carbon-wise, it was well worth having. However, like anything, when you early adopt, you come across issues, and there were some lessons learned that I thought it might be useful to share with you in case you're about to embark on this journey. So for the business case, I would say get your finance people involved quite early and make sure it's clear that the fuel savings are factored in, because at first glance, the switch to electric can appear sort of higher cost, alarming figures. But actually, once you factor in the fuel use, it's very similar, like for like in most cases. Think about your DESIR assessments, so your dangerous substances and explosive atmosphere regulations assessments, and get your fire safe charging units in place to avoid ad hoc charging. With the best will in the world, if you bring in plant and you haven't got things ready, people start doing their own thing. And I'm sure we've all seen clips on YouTube and so on of electric batteries and kit at home bursting into flames, and obviously we don't want to create an issue with that sort of thing there. One that is probably for engaging with the safety team, but do review the halves for the electric plants, so the hand-arm vibration numbers, because they're not always less than the fossil fuel alternatives, which you might think they are. Certainly I did. And if you're using the plant differently, if it needs to be used for longer, then you want to consider that into the picture. So very much the right tool for the right job, and in many cases the switch has worked really, really well, but there are a few nuances where we've decided that actually maybe that bit of kit's not quite there yet. The other thing I would say is try and have an opportunity for people to try the new kit, raise their concerns and bust any myths. The example I would give is the blowers that you see in the picture there on the right hand of the slide. Some of our guys, their perception was that the battery pack was heavier than the petrol alternative that they'd previously had. So we brought the kit in, the old and the new, side by side and weighed them, and we were actually able to show that it was actually a little bit lighter, in fact, but it was really important to give people the opportunity and allow them to see the difference. On the nature side of things, so I think you've probably heard about the A417 on some of the plenary sessions today. It's another project to dual a 3-mile stretch of road in the Cotswolds. If you know the Cotswolds, it is a beautiful area, but it is a real problem in terms of traffic on that road, as well as our kind of biodiversity targets in terms of what we're looking to plant and add into the area. There are some really important species that are already present in that area, and it's really important for us to relocate them safely and make sure that we put them in areas where they will thrive, not just survive. So you'll see on the right-hand picture there, that's an adder, if you didn't know. So this area is quite a stronghold for adders, the only venomous snake in this country. A lovely specimen there, I think you'll agree. So we've put in fencing, we've captured over 25 now, and they've been safely relocated out of the area into a new habitat where they'll be happy, we hope. But we've also taken the opportunity to work with some experts in adders, and you'll see that chap there has got attached to his tail a little radio tracking unit, and that will allow us to follow their progress, but also, you know, maybe learn new things about how they behave and give opportunities to build on knowledge, and that will just drop off over time, the radio tracker, as the adhesive files, because sometimes people like to know that. Other species on the site, which I'm just going to breeze over because of time, but similarly, we've got some protected snails on the site, Roman snails. They're not terribly willing to sit in the buckets and be relocated, but we are locating them to safe spaces where they can continue on their way. And we're also closing out some badger sets, another protected species, but obviously if you're going to do that, you have to build them a new home, and that's what you can see on the right. That will obviously be covered over with spoil and planted up, but essentially we've recreated the chambers where they live, and then the pipe work is the tunnels where they'll make their way through, and we'll monitor that. We'll put cameras in place, so we'll be able to check that they've seen and located and are using that set before we close off their old home, so that we know they're okay. And then finally, on the community side of things, so another large new road project up in between Windy Harbour and Schiphol. Again, another really congested area, lots of vehicle movements. But this scheme has been to build an offline bypass, which includes 3 new bridges. And as part of this work, we've been working with a company called Flannery Plant Hire to utilise some new Swiss technology designed by Brextor technology. And actually, if you are interested in this, on the Brextor website, there's a really good 3-minute film that just shows you how this bit of kit works, because my explanation is probably going to fall short. But essentially, this new technology was used to process the pile heads of the new bridge structure. And the benefits were as follows. So it basically, that bit of kit that you can see on the right-hand side, that white box drops onto the head of the pile and gently sort of mills it. Previously, that sort of work had to be done from the side, so it required a lot more space. And by using this bit of kit, the site team reported that it basically quartered the amount of time, so they could do 4 times as much work in the same period. So that dramatically reduced construction time, so it was more efficient. And then the side benefits to the community was that was less people on site, less transport and kit coming in. Practically, it required less space for us to do the work. But it also reduced the impact on the local community in terms of noise, which was, because the work was much shorter, less dust and emissions to air. So that improved efficiency also had benefits for the local community as well, which was really positive. And then my final slide, just conscious of time, was just, I'm not going to go through these things, I'm sure slides will be available, but just to say there's always opportunities to add a little bit extra on this environmental sustainability projects by just pulling in the social value arm and creating, positive green spaces for people in the local community. So with that, I will stop sharing. Hopefully that will take me back to the room. And I did see there were a couple of questions earlier, so I want to give people opportunity for that. There we go.
Thanks, Rebecca. There is one question that's been raised by Jason in the Q&A and in the chat. I've answered it. I've provided a response in the chat. The question has been, can I ask what leaner construction means? That and you said, does it mean cost saving techniques in building bridges? Well, it could mean that, but what it means for us in terms of environmental sustainability is about taking a applying a decision making process that ensures that we undertake construction in the first place only if other solutions cannot meet our performance needs. So it's about reducing the need to undertake new construction, therefore use resources wherever possible and where construction is necessary. So it's taking that construction hierarchy of assessing alternative options, whether maintaining an existing bit of asset is preferable to developing a new bit of asset, for example. But if construction is necessary, having followed that process, then it's about ensuring that there's a minimal footprint that minimizes resource uses, waste and carbon emissions. And within that process, yes, it's about those are the environmental outcomes we want from a leaner construction process. But it can also be about doing that in a way that delivers work streams more efficiently and therefore is delivers efficiency savings. So I hope that's I have put a response into the chat room, Jason, so hopefully that clarifies that point. Other than that, I don't see any other questions, but please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions you may have. I see Lorraine has put a message in the chat to encourage people to provide feedback on the session. And then Jason has, I'm just collecting, Ferrostrada has created an innovative system to supply renewable energy for construction sites. Can I ask how we would be able to speak about this with the environmental sustainability team? Well, certainly, yes, you can reach out to me, Jason. I'll be happy to put you in touch with our Central Carbon team colleagues and those leading on the renewable energy work streams. If that's fine, do you want me to put my contact details into the chat room, or do you have them anyway through this to people?
I actually don't know, to be honest. There's probably no harm dropping it in the chat if you're happy to do that.
Okay. And finally, do you think current design standards will have an impact on how you achieve your goals? Yes, absolutely, they will. We'll certainly be looking going forward to how we amend and improve our design standards to reflect the ambitions of delivering benefits in nature, carbon, community areas. I mean, take nature-based solutions for example. We want to see greater emphasis put on that as a first choice in as a design solution where possible, and that sort of initiative will need to be sort of promulgated through our design standards along with a raft of other sort of changes and improvements to reflect these new ambitions. So yes, but we have a rolling program of updating our standards in the design manual for roads and bridges every 5 years, and there's a continual cycle of review and update, and so I envisage that this will naturally pick up as each of our design standards in turn comes around for review. They'll be reviewed through the lens of the new environmental sustainability strategy and ongoing sort of priorities for design in those areas. So I hopefully covered that one off. And we have one more from Stephen King. I think that's for you, James.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on that. So it's about eco-welfare units. So yes, have we invested in these products? So no, we haven't as yet bought any outright because we've always tended to work on hiring them on a hiring them basis, but we are beginning to use them more frequently. I mean, I'm not going to go as far as saying business as usual, although some contracts have already made that decision to go to business as usual for using them. But we do have a minimum standard for site accommodation and welfare units in Kier, which I believe is being updated at the moment. So I think the recommendations, or the minimum standards, I should say, will be more stringent. And I think on the major project side of things, I think we have started to have discussions about potentially investing in certain elements of sort of site compound kit, so that we're purchasing rather than leasing. So, and obviously if we do go down that road, then yeah, we will be looking for the best, most sustainable options we can, whether that's site welfare cabins or compound lighting, whatever it might be.
Thanks, James. I've added my contact details into the chat room, my email address. Should you wish to have any further sort of queries in relation to National Highways environmental strategy, or be put in contact with the relevant person within our organisation on any feature of the strategy. So feel free to drop me a line. Do we have any more questions on open mic? Because I think we've exhausted those in the chat and the Q&A. Does anybody have a question they wish
got about
to
a minute left, so yeah.
raise? Otherwise, I hope you found this session helpful, useful, instructive. Please provide feedback through the link that Lorraine has provided in the chat room, and it just leaves me to thank James and Rebecca as well for their contributions this afternoon. And we'll leave it there. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.